Now, the ANC says it will actively participate in the forthcoming consultative process on policy directives in the ICT sector. It says engagements will be guided by the principles set out in the Freedom Charter, the ANC Election Manifesto, and the 55th National Conference resolutions. Tonight, we are asking if you think ANC policies are aligned with voter preferences. So join the conversation by sending us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584, or you can give us a call on 010-594-6010. Let's now speak to UNISA Political Sciences Professor Dirk Kotze, a digital ecosystems and telecoms expert, Piwe Chirega, and the SAFTU General Secretary, Zwelinzima Vavi. A very good evening to all three of you. Thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. Prof, perhaps let's begin this discussion with you. So there was a recent survey that was done by the South African Institute of Race Relations, and they show that the ANC faces significant risks if it does not realign its policies to meet the electorate's demands. How would you assess the current alignment between the ANC policies and the expressed preferences of South African voters?
Yes, good evening. I think what we have seen in terms of what you refer to as the opinion polls, that there's a decline, and it's now a consistent decline since, not only since last year's election, it's actually since 2009 that the ANC has been in a gradual decline in terms of public support at the time of elections. So the question really is, what is the main reason for that decline? Is it these policies that we are talking about, or is it other matters, like, for example, service delivery issues, that it is about the impact of corruption, that it is that there's a feeling that the ANC has lost sort of direct contact and interaction with its core base of supporters. So that makes it slightly tricky in order to say that it is purely about, or mainly about, policies like this. We've seen within the ANC some discussions quite some time back already about where they ask themselves the question. I can think, for example, just before the time, I think it was in 2002, where they asked themselves this question about to what extent this policy is the most effective one in terms of reaching the objective that they have in mind. So it's a question about objective on the one hand versus policy on the other hand. That means the mechanism, the instrument in order to reach that policy. And I think everyone will say on principle, you are much more firm, but in terms of policies, you must be more flexible in order to be as reach the outcome or the end result as best as possible. So I think this is the real challenge for the ANC, and how they are going to interpret where they stand at the moment. And it's clear that what the public is saying is that they are not supporting everything of the ANC at this moment.
Perhaps let's just bring in Mr. Vavi now in the conversation, and just staying on the survey. I mean, they say that registered voters showed preferences for merit-based policies, job creation, and value for money government spending over race-based initiatives. From a labor and economic perspective, what do you suppose is hindering the ANC in terms of their ability to implement policies that promote inclusive growth for voters?
Well, from our perspective as the working class, what is killing the ANC is its disloyalty to the policies that it adopted over many years, in particular from the 1955 Freedom Charter moment that was centered around two main demands. The first one being the people shall govern, and the second one being that the wealth of the country shall be shared amongst all the people of this country. And when the ANC abandoned that vision in favor of neoliberalism, and recently in favor of the austerity program for privatization, for slimmer state, and for cutting the jobs of the public service such that it undermines the capacity of the state to provide services to the people, healthcare, education, policing, home affairs, you name them all. Then it started to distance itself from the working class itself. From the perspective of the working class, it betrayed their historical mission that they, the motive forces of the revolution, will be main beneficiaries of the transformation that was to be. And when they could, in concrete terms, point out that the main beneficiaries of the economic transformation were the same forces that oppressed them and exploited them during the apartheid and colonial era, the working class started to turn their backs on the ANC, starting in Cape Town, moving to Gqeberha, Nelson Mandela area, and now in Johannesburg, Pretoria, East Rand, Rulening, and the ANC is about to lose its majority in Durban, and if they are not careful, they will lose that majority in Bloemfontein as well. So that's, to us, the crux of the matter.
Spiwe, the conversation now is on the policy directives in the ICT sector. And we saw the Minister of Communications speaking about how the amendment and the move towards more and equity equivalence would be more preferred over BEE laws in the current state that they are in. And the ANC has put out a statement saying that they note the ICT policy reforms and commits to defending transformation and economic inclusion. In your view, how do politics influence policy decisions related to digital and infrastructure and economic development?
Right. Well, they do. They actually do influence the policy requirements. Because remember, although it's an ICT sector, it doesn't exist in a vacuum. It exists within a community, exists within an economy. So it's very important to make sure that whatever policies are out there, whatever frameworks that are being adopted, they all speak to each other. So we can't have, ICT policies saying one thing and then, you've got, let's call it the other national policies saying another, or the two are not necessarily enforcing each other. So it is very, very important that while they're looking to make this change to relax the BEE requirement in favor of the EEP, or to allow investors to choose between the two, it is very, very important to make sure that in those changes, we are still all going for the same thing, right? Which is to make sure that the economy is empowered, the locals are empowered, and also there's a real commitment from those investors, coming into South Africa to set up their businesses.
Prof, Mr. Vavi spoke about the ANC's disloyalty to policies, and this is why now there is a decline in terms of the voters now wanting to go in the direction of the ANC. We've seen over time some of the factional battles that exist within the party, and they've played a part in terms of how now the voter reacts towards the party. We also see the statement that they did put out, like I mentioned a little earlier on, with regards to the policy reforms and the possible adjustments of the BEE laws. And they speak and they emphasize that the digital expansion must be anchored in transformation. Do you think that there's a play with regards to some tensions within the ANC and some not necessarily agreeing with the direction that would be taken with regards to this policy directive?
Well, I think within the ANC as political party, there appears to be differences of opinion. And as we've seen now over many years, actually, on many policies, there's difference of opinion. Almost all the policies, there's difference of opinion within the ANC. And this is a good example of it. I think Black economic empowerment for the ANC has been one of its core policies, because it is something which I think, together with employment equity, which they made out as one of the key issues that can create a very solid base for them. So long as there's persons who benefit from that, they will have, politically speaking, a very strong constituency. I think what we've seen is that, for example, in the Western Cape, they've lost that constituency. They have also lost it, I think, in many other parts of the country, because many people, though being Black, and African, they don't feel necessarily that they benefit from it. Because on the one hand, this policy is there, but on the other hand, the unemployment rate is increasing. The inequality is increasing in the country. So it's clear for many people that these policies are not making the impact that for which they were designed to do. And therefore, there is not a sense that there's a way forward, that there's progress being made. And I think this is part of the dilemma of the ANC now, is that they don't have a clear alternative without being seen that they are reneging on one of their key principles about social and economic transformation. So I think that is what makes this such a difficult decision for them. On top of that is that it is now an external factor that comes in, and that is that it is a foreign company that wants to come into South Africa. It's not a South African company. There, the Black economic empowerment principles are much easier to explain than when it is a foreign company. And even on top of that is now the politics of our relationship with the United States. And that complicates the matter much more from a political point of view, because there's a strong view within the ANC and some of the other political organizations also that we have to be exceptionally careful and create and keep a distance away from having too close relations, economic relations with the US, because it will be to the disadvantage of South Africa from a power relation point of view. So these are all the things coming together in this particular situation.
All right. Let's just hold the conversation there. When we do come back, Mr. Vavi, I want us to continue on this point of the internal factional conflicts within the ANC. And as Prof is talking about the difference of opinion that they have and how this influences a lot of the policy, you can still join us in our discussion. Give us a call on 010-594-6010, or you can send us a WhatsApp in order for you to share your views with us. But first, let's take a quick break. We'll be back after this. Welcome back, and thank you for staying with us. We are asking the question today if ANC policies are aligned with voter preferences. We do have a caller on the line, Mlwandwa, in Ekurhuleni. A very good evening to you. Talk to us. What's your opinion on our question this evening?
Good evening. Good evening, and your panel.
Evening to you, Mlwandwa. You may go ahead.
Yes.
Go ahead, Mlwandwa. We are listening.
Yeah. No, the policy of the ANC is still much more relevant with the voters. Much more relevant. If I can make one typical example, before 1994, in terms of the judiciary, there was not even a single male magistrate or a prosecutor. But because of the ANC policy now, you found female judges, female prosecutors. The challenge is that this policy, remember, they are there to redress the imbalances of the past. But those who've benefited in terms of the apartheid system and the white supremacy, they are making it difficult that those policies must be implemented effectively and efficiently. But equally so, there is a lack of monitoring in terms of the government, in terms of this policy. That is one of the challenges. Though the policy does still fine. I mean, look at the Bella Act, look at the National Health Insurance Act, look at the Equity Bill. Those policies are still relevant. Just because the pace of the government in terms of implementing this thing is not assisting. Remember that those who have been affected by the past system of the regime, they're in majority in the country, they're not minority. Therefore, there is this impatience in terms of those policies making fundamental radical changes within those people that have been affected by the past system.
All right, Mlwandwa, thank you so much for your thoughts and your views. We have Sanele in Mnambiti. A very good evening to you. Sanele, give us your thoughts.
Good evening, my sister. Good evening to the panel. My sister, that has been long overdue, because since then, the ANC policies does not even talk to the voters, actually. Because how can you say that you are having a sustainable good policies when your policies does not bring any joy to the economy of the country, the growth of the individual?
All right.
Serious. These policies, if they can accept this transformation, that will be a goal to them. really the ANC we need a healthier, the policies that can, attract the investors, that can attract the market, then can attract us as a country to compete with the other African countries. But with these policies, we can't even compete with Zimbabwe. We can't.
All right, Sanele, thank you so much for giving us your thoughts this evening. Let's now turn to your WhatsApps and see what your thoughts are there. Our first WhatsApp is from Kagiso. And Kagiso says, no, it's just love and hope for better things to happen. They are very blind to see the ANC is against this country. Our next one is from Ngonde Buku. And Ngonde says the answer is no, a big no. The ANC policies are no longer aligned with voter preferences. High unemployment rates, crime, corruption, and poverty in our communities have contributed a lot to the ANC's failure to align itself to their policies. And one that says, good evening all, good evening to you. ANC policies are good, but implementations and monitoring are not in line with the preferences of the majority they seek to assist, especially services and businesses to the ordinary poor people. That's Luke from Pretoria. All right, now going back to our panelists, Mr. Vavi, just to pick up on the point that we were speaking on in terms of the internal factions, and Prof there saying that there are a lot of differing views when it comes to a lot of the policies within the ANC, and particularly the BEE policy, which is one of their core policies. We also heard from the ANC's subcommittee chair on communications in Gekekekana, speaking to Business Day, and he was saying that there would be jobs that would be on the line if they are reckless with this policy directive. The investment is already on the ground and would go on to create a wasteland of networks, saying that current licenses need to be protected from new entrants. How do you see factional disputes within the ANC affecting workers and the broader economic reforms?
Well, the ANC has always been a broad church of traditionalist, conservatives, feminist, progressive socialist, reactionary, rural people. Everybody is there as long as they were opposed to the apartheid system. The point I want to make from my perspective, as having been into that arrangement for all my life until recently, is that the ANC was hijacked in two ways. On the eve of democracy, the capitalist forces managed to capture it at the policy level so that it can abandon the historical demands and the historical mission of the liberation struggle. But there was a secondary hijacking by the middle strata in society, and the middle strata began to influence the policy direction away from the fundamental demands of the working class. And the fundamental demands of the working class centered around two issues. The first one is jobs, and not just jobs, jobs at a living wage. The second one is to address the demands of the midsection of the body, the stomach, addressing poverty, the want, the deprivation, the ravaging of the colonial and apartheid capitalist era. And when it comes to those two issues, just to show that how disloyal the middle strata can be, it began to shift the ANC closer and closer to all of the demands of the capitalist class, such that by November of 1995, it announced a privatization program. By June of 1996, it announced a neoliberal program called Growth, Employment and Redistribution Strategy, or GEAR, and followed by the series of other announcements to reinforce the fact that the economy will remain in the hands of the people, and that the redistribution strategies from the Freedom Charter to Morogoro conferences, resolutions, will be abandoned for a trickle-down economic program that is centered around creating an environment for business to prosper, to invest, and telling the people to tighten their belts whilst waiting for capital to deliver employment opportunities, address poverty, and other developmental questions, which it has now dismally failed on. Dismally failed that, as we speak, we are in the worst catastrophe in terms of unemployment at 43%. 12.7 million people unemployed, of those 10 million being in long-term structural unemployment, meaning that there have not been any kind of employment for more than a year. The face of that unemployment, unfortunately, remains the working class, the poor black people, and whilst they're looking at the fortunes of the tiny minority through the black economic empowerment changing. So you have a handful of well-connected politically tycoons and who are the face of this hijack that I was speaking about, who are stinking rich, resulting into the growing gaps now between those who are in the liberation camp. Some are stinking rich, but they are few, but the overwhelming majority is trapped in squalor, in unemployment, in rural areas that have no roads, no proper functioning schools, still using latrine toilets, and no laboratories, no libraries, whilst the elite can take their kids to the best schools, in the private schools, and all of that. So in that fight within, in this multi-class arrangement of the liberation movement, the clear winner became the capitalist core class and the middle strata that hijacked the liberation movement in order to look upstairs to the fortunes of the capitalist class of empowering the downtrodden masses of that are trapped in unemployment and poverty.
Right. Cynthia, I mean, just speaking of those impacts, Mr. Vavi speaks about that fight between that multi-class arrangement within the liberation movement. That fight, those tensions, how much of an impact does that have on the ICT sector, especially when it comes to the rolling out of digital and ICT infrastructure development?
All right. So I'm going to start by just highlighting the role that ICT plays, right? We know that at the moment we're in a stage where all roads lead to ICT, right? We are in the digital era. On the one hand, yes, we need the infrastructure, we need, the supporting facilities to allow infrastructure to thrive. However, there is a key aspect that we need to realize, and that is how economies are completely being shifted and transformed by ICT. So, I mean, just listening to my two colleagues, and I might actually say I do to an extent agree with them, up to a point, the current BEE policies as they stand, they have not resulted in that much transformation that ICT could potentially deliver. So now we're going into a space where, we've got this new digital divide, right? It's no longer about who has money or who doesn't. It's about who understands digital and who can work with it versus those who can't. So what we're faced with at the moment is that we need to equip the unemployed, the youth, the rural communities. They need to be equipped with the skills. Now, yes, to an extent and up to a point, I understand the logic behind we could empower via ownership. But when I look at the proposed EEP, I believe that it is touching on the key areas that ICT could actually make a real change. So the first one being that they want an increased, and it would be focusing on investment in skills or job creation. We do need those technical skills. We do need to equip our youth and the vastly unemployed personnel with those skills. I'm sure you've heard the statistic that, 80% of the jobs that are going to be there in 2030 in 2040 have not yet even been created. And that's thanks to digital. So by focusing on that, by making sure that whoever is coming to South Africa, whoever is investing, at least can actually look at where, my colleagues were talking about, that grassroots impact. That is why the change is needed, in the ICT sector, to really ensure that the potential impact it has, both on, as Mr. Ravi said, on the one hand, we need jobs. On the other hand, we need to also address the issue of poverty so that it can actually have that impact it has. So jobs, yes. And then for poverty, like it says, we need our SMEs to thrive. We need them to actually be able to provide, a way for people to sustain themselves. And ICT being at a core and being such a big sector could potentially uplift a notable portion of our SMEs to ensure that they have that impact to also address the poverty issue. So I believe that, yes, a change is needed. And looking at the EEP and what they're trying to go for, I believe it's in the right direction. But then again, the proof is in the pudding. So we'll see how it gets implemented.
Well, it certainly is. After the break, we're going to be discussing more with regards to, do South Africans even understand how these policies affect them? But let's hold the conversation there for now and take a quick break. Do send us your WhatsApps and give us a call and give us your opinion in the question that we're asking today. It's 010-594-6010 to give us a call, or send us a WhatsApp on 072-110-5584. Welcome back. We're still continuing with our conversation today, and we're asking if ANC policies are resonating with South African voters. We do have a caller on the line, Mutema in Umkhanyagude. Very good evening to you. What's your comment tonight?
Good evening, Katel. To me, all 500 or 300 political parties in South Africa do not have any policy that they present to the South African in order to say this is what they are going to do in case the ANC is dead. All of them, majority are saying they can only modify a particular, a particular policy of the ANC in order to advance the country. Because the mistake that we are making, even the analysts, is to think that the outcome of the 2024 election was as a result of the policy shift of the ANC or lack of implementation thereof. But everybody knows that in particular case that people voted emotionally because they were told that Ramaphosa is the wrong person to lead the African National Congress. So hence we are implementing the PELA Act in schools, and NHI is in the pipeline. It therefore tells you that there is no political party in this country which has ever advanced the interest of the black people and all the people of this country, irrespective of their colors, using its own policies except the African National Congress. It will only be fair to say, moving forward for the next 8 years, all political parties will still need the same policies of the ANC in order to advance the interests of the people. Because if you look at how the people voted for the MKP, they voted for the MKP because of the Zuma's way of campaigning in KZN. Because there was no policy that he presented together with the MKP. So the policies of the ANC, to me, they are still relevant, and it appears like they will still be relevant in the next 8 years if all of us are still going to live for that particular period.
All right. Thank you so much, Motema, for giving us those very interesting points. We have Tapelo in Mabopani. Tapelo, very good evening to you.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you, Tapelo. What's your question or comment for this evening?
Okay, I'm commenting on the policy of the ANC.
Right. Speak to us.
Yeah, the policy of the ANC is failing us. They have never implemented even a single one of these policies. You can check, they always speak about creating jobs, but you always see the unemployment rate going high. And as people are living on credit, they don't even afford to buy a single bread. They have to go for credit. They have to go to Machonesa. We have potholes. Transporters are no longer safe. You see, the ANC is always promising, but there is nothing that they are doing.
You feel that there's no
So
delivery?
I think maybe they have to check. Yeah, so their policies is just it's like a magnet to attract people and come and vote for us, but they are not doing. None of those policies have been implemented.
All right, Thapelo. Thank you so much for your thoughts this evening. That's Thapelo in Mabopane. We have a few of your WhatsApps also coming through. Temba from Kempton Park says, good evening. The ANC policies are the downfall of this country. We are in this crisis as a country because of the ANC policies. Look at the issue of illegal immigration. And then Al Sipeng from Messina says, ANC policies are great but not aligned correctly, especially when the laws say each and every employer must have a certain percentage of people living with a disability. But look at most departments and municipalities, they don't even try, even though some of us are still fit to work. And Peter Nesta from the Western Cape says, ANC policies do not promote growth, they drive SA backwards. Please, 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 let's do what's best for all of us. And Boiti says ANC policies are all great on paper. The problem is implementation that has led to a failed state. This Bella Act is the worst, having South African kids struggle for space while foreigners are getting first preference. The immigration bill that is not implemented leaves too much to be desired for. All right, and that was our last WhatsApp. Prof, perhaps coming back to you and reflecting on some of the viewers' views in terms of the policies, a majority of them saying these policies don't work. And do we really, as voters and the constituency, actually understand the policies and how do they affect us in our everyday life?
Well, I think we should not underestimate the understanding and the knowledge of the public in general, because they see the practical implications of these policies. They might not know the policies in terms of reading the documents, but they do see what are the implications of that and how do they affect the different communities or the different people in South Africa. So I won't dismiss that. And what we've heard now tonight, also, although it's not necessarily representative of everyone, but it is clearly an indication of how many people feel. And at the same time, we also have to be guided. We don't have much else from what is happening at the time of elections. Still, the majority of South Africans are voting. So we do get some indication of in which direction they are thinking. But I think which is still absent from this debate is to say, are we not, in a sense, recycling the same type of thinking, but we have reached a stage now in terms of development, South Africa's development, and the global context, where we have to think in terms of different paradigms. I'm at UNISA, and we have about 380,000 students. All of them must be able to study by means of online. And that means that once they have been graduated at our university, they are able to be sort of ICT literate. They can use, even if it is just a phone, but they know how to write the examination, they know how to upload, they know how to use the internet, all of those things, which I think is one of the main criteria or the main objectives that we must have as a nation. Because that is going to be the driving force for development, not recycling of ownership of companies, but how to create new opportunities. Look at the new huge entrepreneurs of the world. They've started their own apps. They've started with their own way of taking the initiative, not waiting for jobs to be created for them, but took their own initiative. And I think this is the new way of thinking in the world, not only. And South Africa should catch up with that. And I think this is, for me personally, the way forward, not to have this very divisive debate of who's owning what in terms of existing companies, but rather opening up, making more the opportunities. And that means empowering people, give them the opportunities in order to be able to develop themselves based on their training, based on their knowledge, based on the experience that they get as young people.
So, Mr. Vavi, we got a few callers and Thapelo was speaking about how the ANC uses some of these policies as a magnet to attract voters. But Motema said that we shouldn't make the mistake of thinking that people vote based on policy. He made the example of the MK party and how they had no policy, but yet they were able to get a favorable base. How do you think we're moving forward in terms of voters and attracting those voters, particularly when it comes to policy making?
Well, Thapelo is on denial. The reality we face is that the biggest political party in South Africa today is the party of the disillusioned. We are up to here. We have been betrayed. We have lost hope. We don't see a clear future. And the overwhelming majority of the voters belong to that party. No one is representing us. That's the first reality we are facing at this particular moment. And it is demonstrated by the fact that only about 37% of the voting population participated in the last elections of 2024. That's a fact, meaning that almost 2/3 of the population didn't participate. And this is then the next point. That disillusioned party, which is constituted by the millions of voters who won't participate, is making a statement that says, yes, we have been disappointed, but we don't trust anyone else. There is no alternative to the party that liberated us. So we are going to, in an organized way, play football during the elections day. So that's the reality. So the ANC still have a chance to go back to that party if, in our view, it was to go back to the fundamental mission of the Freedom Charter's economic demands, of the RDP, of growth through redistribution of wealth from the rich to the poor. And if it was to do those things, it may still win back those people. But for now, the majority of South Africans are disillusioned and they are not embracing any alternative to the ANC. They are sitting at home, and that's now the reality. And that's where then South Africa faces a real ticking time bomb. With 12.7 million people constituting the majority of that disillusioned party, then you can expect an unled revolution in South Africa. We are sitting on a powder keg, a ticking time bomb.
Right.
And you can't have 10 million people in long-term structural unemployment, and the 60% of them have never worked in their lives. You are playing with fire. And I think whenever everything has been said, we have to go back to that reality that we are sitting on a ticking time bomb in the country.
For your closing remarks, unfortunately, we have run out of time. Apologies there, Spio. I really wanted to find out what your closing thoughts were, but maybe just in 30 seconds for you just to tell us. I mean, Prof was saying that we need to shift our thinking and start opening up for other ways of bringing in bigger players. What do you think, how that is going to impact the ICT sector?
Yes, so in closing, the ICT sector's growth is going to be an outside-in type of growth, meaning it's going to be driven mainly by the multinationals, people coming from outside coming into South Africa. And we need to make sure that we create an environment that will allow them to have impact, but not at the ownership level, which we've just heard now. It hasn't had that much of an impact, but to really start touching on the things that matter, which is skilling our youth, creating the jobs, strengthening our small businesses, and just really boosting the local ICT suppliers.
All right. Yeah. Thank you so much for your time and for all your thoughts, Mr. Vavi, Prof. and Spio. It certainly has been quite enlightening. And I'm sure many of our voters are looking at how these policies influence their everyday lives and how we're moving forward, especially in bringing in new players in order for us to open up doors for job and more employment in our country. Now, we have got more news coming up after the break, so do stay with us. We'll see you right after this.